kick it off, Dan.
All
Let's
right,
go.
Yep. I'm starting us off week, 6, 8 of AEP.
5.
We're in the trench.
5. But who's counting, right?
It's a blur.
It would be over.
I know.
Week 8.
It feels like it's 8. I count those pre-AEP weeks. Sure. So anyways, really excited about our guest today. We've been having a good time today in the office already. I will have our friends from UHC in, but I'll turn it over to you all to introduce yourselves.
Sure, absolutely. Excited to be here with you. My name is Rachel Hurtado, and I have the pleasure of leading our external distribution channel.
I call you the Medicare queen. As
I like it. I didn't wear my sash. I could have brought a tiara today, too.
As unofficial title, you know.
I am Mike Volpe. I'm a National Growth Manager on Rachel's team. Been with UHC for 10 years.
Yep. So very much we
stalwarts in the industry, right?
Yeah, yep. we appreciate the trek out here, you know, all the way across the country from Jersey and from St. Louis, respectively. Yep. So anyways.
They brought the snow with them today to the mountains, so they got an early preview of winter.
It's beautiful.
It was awesome.
Yep. So we're kind of in the very middle of a really chaotic AEP so far. I mean, probably the most chaotic that we've seen in at least 10 years. I mean, I've been around since 2007 in Medicare Advantage, so I've lived through some of it. But definitely at least the last 10 years, it's been the most disruptive. Thoughts so far from like the carrier end or what you're seeing? I mean, we had a sidebar convo obviously already about early results and kind of what's been happening, but give us your thoughts so far.
So I would agree. It's been 10 years. So I've been at United 10 years. So my first AEP, I started while everybody was at National Sales Meeting. So that one was difficult because I didn't know what was going on. But since then, this is definitely the most disruptive AEP I think we've had. It's kind of a culmination of all kinds of things. So it's not just, disruption from one carrier or another or one market or one region. It's across the country. It's from all carriers. It is a crazy AEP. It's been a good AEP for us. We're super happy with the results and appreciate all of the business and the partnerships we've got. It's been a few years since we've won an AEP, and I am a competitive soul, and I do like to win. So this one is a fun one for me. While it's crazy, it is a fun one.
I would say, though, like I would push back a little bit and say, like, you guys, it seems like UHC is always winning, though. Like maybe not by, like, percentage of growth or something, because when you're tracking it and saying, like, winning, it's more about, well, who got the most net growth percentage or something. It's easier to grow when you have a couple thousand members, but you guys are the industry leader, so it's kind of hard to stack the chips.
Yeah, it is. I mean, last year was tough for us. I mean, it was not a good year. It wasn't positive growth for us last year. So to see, it hasn't all played out. The other thing I think that's important this year is I think OEP is going to be as crazy as AEP this year with all of the SARs that have happened across the industry. So, while we're 5 weeks in and we think we only have a couple weeks left, we really don't. We have a lot more than a couple weeks left.
Yep.
So
you nailed it. We've been calling it Super AEP this year, just
I like
because
it.
It's Super AEP
That's a good name for it.
from October 1st through March 31st, and it's just like, hey, if you thought you were going to enjoy Christmas, guess what? You're not.
Well, the day, and then it's...
Yeah, exactly. But even...
Like when open enrollment used to be through Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you're like, I'll see you guys Christmas morning, but I got to work in the afternoon.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, agents are used to, like, the, you work really hard December 7th, and then you take, like, we would always say another day to wrap up and, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure, like, there's no other, closed business, so to speak, for the year, and then they take off 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But that's
a ghost town.
That's not going to happen. In fact, from our like virtual teams and agents who are selling remotely, a lot of them we've said, hey, if you want to, take off unpaid time off or other things like that in December, go for it. But this year it's going to be wild with all the SARs. I just think people are going to work.
I even have internal meetings. I mean, I'm not going to lie. We do the same way. Like December 7th happens, usually for the first, 3 or 4 days after that, right, we're wrapping up stuff and running like our tail end, our last snapshots, wishing everybody happy holidays. And then we get kind of quiet too. And I have meetings all the way up through the 20th. I was like, man.
I know. It's brutal.
Well, this year, in addition to all the traditional chaos from the industry, we had like the hurricanes that are two pretty substantial affecting hurricanes that are going to be SEPs.
Yep.
I mean, our Tampa office was fairly disrupted. We got a slow start there for AEP and helping people because of how impactful that was to Florida.
Yeah, for sure.
It was the E word. I say the E word that happens in November because if I use the full word, I can't post this on Google or YouTube or promote it or anything.
Oh, yeah.
But the E word just happened last week, and so that was somewhat disruptive as well.
That's always disruptive.
And so that was a little weird to throw that all in the mix of everything as well.
Well, it just adds to the craziness that we've had, right?
Yeah.
Anything that you could think to throw on the pile for this year has happened.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, you're
Right.
winning AEP, right? So
Winning right
when
now.
you say, are you talking like, what do you look at? Net growth, percentage of
membership.
growth overall? What are
I look at as a company, we look at everything, right? At the end of the day, everybody's trying to net grow. Right now, all I can see is sales, right? I can see sales, I can see limited terms, I see plan changes. There's a pattern for that. I look at channel mix and how field distribution is doing. This year, leading up to this AEP, I think there was a lot of really positive momentum with the agent community and all the levels in the hierarchy in this business coming together because of the proposed regulation. So if there was something positive, I think it brought some cohesiveness back to our business, which I'm happy to see. And then there was a lot of stuff happening, meaning there was, we launched an educational series. I know other carriers did, trying to get this agents up to speed on what was happening in the business, the impacts to IRMA, all the impacts that were happening, all the changes in the regulations. And it gave us some really good positive momentum heading into AEP. So we kind of saw a trend as we started into AEP where the sales kind of, hockey sticked at the end of the year for us also, which is always a good sign for us. And then we launched, AEP, right? 10-1, lots of activity, a ton of engagement across the country that we've seen from agency partners. I love the channel mix. I'm super proud of the channel mix. I think everybody should be that's involved in this business. This year, right now, the field agents are over 50% of our total sales volume, which is awesome.
Good.
Which means that, we saw record turnouts at local market rollouts. I had an opportunity to participate in agency rollouts kind of across the country. The national team did, and then the local markets, huge agent turnout events. And so to see the agents rise to the occasion and to be the preferred distribution channel for the members, for them to be driving and engaged, with half of the sales, I think that's a win for us in distribution.
I think that's a great point. Obviously the size that UHC is, to say that field agents are still obviously very important to make up a big proportion or over 50% of that channel mix. It seems like the field agents had kind of a rough go, and it took a lot of them a few years to rebound from even the COVID years, where it was almost like, the field agent's going to, make it back. But we're definitely seeing the same thing, a resurgence. And we talked off camera about, kind of the importance of these agents. And one of the things that Dan and I have talked about is this year it's been chaotic and it's been difficult, but it's made the agents who are engaged have to be better, right? They've had to become a lot more skilled about understanding how the industry functions. It's not always just plans get better every year and money is unlimited and you go write business and plans expand. Yeah, right. But if you've only been in the business for 4, 5, 6 years,
right?
That's all you've seen, is that that each year you increase a fringe benefit, and things get slightly cheaper and all these carriers expand. There's never a contraction, and so I think I'm grateful that it's made the agents have to be much more sophisticated and a better tool ultimately for the beneficiaries.
Yeah,
what matters the most.
Two things I want to add to that too is that field is so important to carriers, and I hope that when we have regulators or folks from CMS or whoever else listening, is the reason they matter so much is the quality of business, right? And I'm sure you guys can speak to that as a carrier, is that, look, all apps and all business is not created equal. I mean, you have different distribution channels for a reason, but the quality, when you look at longevity and the lifetime value of that member, and then, other metrics and components, even capturing email addresses, being able to get the phone numbers, engagement with like the risk management team, rapid disenrollments, cancellation. When you really start looking at accretion and everything in the quality, I'm assuming it's probably the best performing channel for you all, right, on the field side?
Is, for sure, it is. I mean, and call centers, we had a big spike in call center during COVID, right? I mean, nobody wanted anybody at their kitchen table. So you saw not just call centers, but telephonic sales kind of peak and become a bigger percentage. And they're still huge. I mean, call center volume is still a significant part of distribution, of external distribution. And, it felt like that was in its infancy. So, I mean, you guys know from working in call center space too, right? Policies changed, procedures changed. I mean, CTMs have gone down. Yep. Retention has gone up, right? It's not the same as the field, right, but very significant strides in the last couple of years too. But the field retention, those relationships that the field agents build, one in the community and two with their members. I mean, we talked about, I did a brief stint as an agent, and I was not cut out for it. 4 hours is too long to spend on a single appointment.
If you become her client, she'll go to your funeral. That's what we found out.
Selling point.
I still answered his calls, right? Yeah. I said this job, and I was still answering his calls about his mail. So it was not cut out for this. But it's great to see that. And I agree, there's been a lot of education that had to happen. This was a challenging year. We tried to set the stage, us and the majority of the carriers, right, what was happening in this industry. And we talked off camera that I think there's still more education that needs to happen. Also on, the process that we go through for bid planning and what the levers are and, what that looks like from a carrier perspective. It's not just, 10-1, here the plans are, right? It's a 9-month process, right, to get the bids out. So.
And one thing that I hope I don't derail your train of thought too much, but the one thing that we talk about frequently, and part of what we want to do with the podcast is, it's more awareness. Like, we feel like what we do is more of a vehicle of information to everybody in the industry and kind of a behind the scenes look and, exposing them to a lot of different carriers' products, understanding. But a big common theme is that if you go on forums right now, you go on Facebook pages, you go anywhere else right now, the average, we call it average agent or NPN right now, is just up in arms. I mean, the pitchforks are out, the torches are there, they're ready to storm the castle. Everybody's really pissed this year, understandably, but they don't understand everything. Like you mentioned, levers right now. There's a lot of things that happen from a policy perspective, from CMS and policies that were implemented, to the funding environment, to our economy, to just all these things that work their way down. We haven't talked about V28 or NABO or TBC or all these other things that happen in creating products. And when we're all in this room, like, we live and breathe it, and we're like geeking out and reading papers all the time and in meetings and briefings, and so we get it.
Nighttime reading.
But right? I mean, that's like, I'm telling my wife at night, did you know this? And she's like, Dan, I don't care.
Stop talking to me.
We all love it, but your average agent, they don't follow it to that degree. But the end result has been, everything's difficult, everything's painful, and create a lot of distrust where a lot of the broker community at large right now feels very victimized and kind of very distrustful of carriers a little bit. And
I would agree. I mean, I read all the social media posts too, and there's just, again, it's a super volatile AEP. And I think, like you talked about, a lot of agency owners that geek out on how the business works and the business behind the sales, which has always been fascinating to me, which includes bid planning, right? And, inside a giant company like United, it's, marketing levers we're going to pull, and what are the product planning, and, what are the markets, and, where are we, what does a portfolio look like? What is a C-SNP opportunity? What's the D-SNP opportunity? How do we get into all these niche markets? And all of that is fascinating. At a large scale, you get all the way down to the consumer that's sitting at the kitchen table or coming to a community meeting or hanging out in a retail location, and where those agents are meeting those consumers where they want to be met. It's pretty far removed from all of that, and I think it's really important for them to understand what's happening in the business. And then I think if we continue that education, it will alleviate some of it. Now, some of it I totally understand. It's just frustration. You know, it rolls downhill, right? And they're the ones that are sitting at the bottom of the hill, but they are super important. And I think as an industry, we just need to continue to educate as we evolve. And there's just been a lot of evolution in the last 12 months when we've been a pretty stable and quiet year-over-year investment, you know, in benefits, you know, expansion territory. It's been, you know, unicorns and sunshines for a lot of years. And so this was the most difficult year that a lot of people that have been in this business have ever seen.
Yeah, I think one of the big concerns for agents is seeing, you know, some of the tried and true plans going non-commissionable and suppressed, and, you know, carriers making their PDPs non-commissionable. And I think what a lot of agents' concern has been that they're going to slowly be, you know, choked out through not having compensation and things like that. And we don't see that. Obviously, you know, we're not concerned about our company and our jobs either, but that is a concern of a lot of agents. How do you see that kind of trending back the other direction, or do you see that kind of the next couple of years we're going to have some challenges, but that's not going to be the norm going forward? How do you think that'll happen?
I think that, I mean, I can't speak for all the other carriers, right? But I think if you look at the things that are happening, you know, it's about, you know, for us, United has always said we've been committed, you know, long term. We're always in this for the long game, right? Yeah, I mean, people have heard us talk about the strength and the stability and, you know, the hassle-free experience. And while that's evolved and it's become different things over the last, I think that was probably 7 years ago, but that mantra, but I still hear it out in the field. I think that if you think about it, it's fine. We're fine tuning the business, right? We got a bunch of proposed regs. We're still waiting on those, you know, to go work their way through the court system. There's pressures, and the tweaks that we're making are about, again, being here for the long haul. I mean, I see, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, or do I, you know, but I see agents as part of the important part of our ecosystem. And, you know, if you look at suppressed plans or non-commissional plans, it's still a very small percentage of plan offerings, statistically, what I've seen across the board from carriers. So it's not a, you know, it's not like a, you know, wiping the slate clean. It's about making sure that it's financially stable, that we're all here for the long haul, that, you know, we want to continue to do this business. We want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
I would only add to that too and say it's been interesting for us because we do geek out in the numbers. We dig into the data. You know, you all have data as good or better than, you know, other people in the industry. And one of the things we did is we compared all the non-commissionable or suppressed plans at large, like all the Hickens, you know, nationwide versus, and the membership on those plans versus the overall membership, and look at that penetration number, which wasn't that much. But, and I will say that you handled it a lot better. I would say that United Healthcare was very out in front before the season and saying, hey, here's an amendment to your contract. Here's the ones that are going to be non-commissionable. And you at least communicated that like well in advance, which I think we really appreciated. But there's been other carriers who the Hickens that they're suppressing are pretty large ones for their particular, you know, so which is obviously signaling that they really can't handle that business. So that is the one thing that I would say, at least for our agency, we appreciate having that heads up, so to speak, and knowing where we're going to navigate the business. So.
And I don't know, again, no crystal ball, so I don't know what SEP looks like for any of us too. Obviously, everybody's pulling levers that they have available. You know, and it's about too making sure we have the right plans for members. Members are going the right plans. You saw, you know, DSNP expansion. You see, like we launched plans for fully, you know, integrated plans for fully dual eligibles, right? We launched a bunch of CSNP plans. We have some lookalikes that are in some markets. It's making sure we're getting members in the right plans that are going to serve them the best also. So, you know, it's a tweak of the portfolio. And when you, every year over year over year, when you've had investment, it's like there's very little difference between the plans, right? It's kind of like everybody looks very similar by and large, and I think you'll see some of that change.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, one of the questions I had is United seems to weather changes a little bit better, more consistent. I think about Steve Warner talking about entering this phase of optimization, right? What is it from your perspective that United does that's different from some of these other carriers that allows United to kind of be a little bit more stable, not have to react or, say, for example, SAR as many plans?
The whole message about stability, I think that's what it is. I think haven't sat inside another carrier in the Medicare space. This has been my home. I'm very impressed with the team that we have, the leadership team, the product team, how we do our product planning process, but it's the commitment to the long game and not the short game that I think has made us have success. Every year, like we've had some success, but for this, it just seems like everything has lined up that, again, being in it for the long haul, there weren't any drastic things that we needed to address, at least not right now.
I'll add to that too and just kind of say I think one of the things that United Healthcare does very well is you go, the agent and the agency, that's our customer, so to speak, like meaning that I think more than anything, you understand your audience and go, if you make the agent experience great for the agent, they're going to go write the business. You're going to get the consumer. I think a lot of other carriers miss that concept overall. And one of the other things going back to agent experiences, the technology is great from Lean to Jarvis to being able to have visibility on your line of business of, knowing to say, hey, I wrote a policy and 2 days later I can log in and see, is there an issue I have to fix or is it accepted or what's going on with my enrollment? Marketing pieces, collateral, that whole experience, I think the United Healthcare has very wisely invested into over the last, 10 plus years, not to mention like Optum and risk management. So there's a lot of other pieces to where, and let's talk about portfolio too. I mean, obviously you guys have a great portfolio from PDP to MA to Chronics to SNPs to MedSup.
Yep.
And an agent, it's kind of a one-stop shop, right? Where you can, get one contractor appointment, do your certifications or even do an AHIP equivalent, and you have access to a full portfolio, right? If an agent wants to sell other carriers, they might have to get 2-3 different carrier appointments to cover those same products. It's not very cohesive. It's kind of a struggle and a challenge. So I would say that's one thing that, not to completely kiss butt and, brown nose here on the podcast.
Sitting here.
Oh, yeah, okay. But, I've been around for a long time, and I have a lot of conversations with agents and agencies too, and you're like, what? Sometimes people are writing so much UHC, and the question is always like, why? And it's just the ease of it. You know what I mean?
Agent experience has been really important. I mean, every year there's significant investment in tools, technology, resources, and the agent experience. I mean, in the local markets, I'm sure, you all have participated. I'm sure you have agents, that are listening that have participated. We do a ton of roundtable discussions post AEP, like what went well, what didn't go well, where are we falling short, what do we need to work on? And that's a continual conversation that is ongoing all year, every year. Like where are you struggling? What is something that we can do better? And it's not that you'll do a round table like everything's great. But if you start peeling back the layer, are we giving you the right data? Do you have the right collateral? And it's an ongoing conversation, and it's a pretty impressive group of people individually inside United that continue to challenge themselves, right, to deliver those tools and resources.
Those roundtables are an incredible resource.
Oh,
do you know what I'm going to talk? It reminds me of the
I know what you're going to
feedback
talk about.
that was given directly to Steve Warner. This was 5 years ago. And one of these agents told him the feedback of benefits to add that he should add essential oils like doTERRA essential oils to the benefit structure. And I was like, man, this guy.
When he was in product. Was when he was SVP product. Yeah,
and he was like, that's some interesting feedback, And I was just like, man, you had your one shot. to
that's what
the
you
guy,
used it.
and that's what you suggested, huh? Was essential oils, huh?
Yeah, and kudos to Mark Briggs even here locally. You know Mark, right?
I don't personally know him. I know his name for sure.
Yeah, he's been a rock star of like a plan president for you guys. A lot of years at like Sierra and anyways. And I go to those same things too, and round tables, and let's talk about products, and the brokers are like, well, I want a 0 premium. Let's have 6,000 dental. I'm just like, okay,
right.
All right, I'll talk to you
$500 in food benefits.
I'll talk to you later, Mark.
The educational piece comes in, right? Sustainability and how the plans are built.
Yeah. It's like, Mark, let's talk offline. We'll talk to you later.
But it's good. I think you sit, you go to Minnesota and you sit in, our product planning process, or you sit with the product team. They're not, they can financially look at how a product looks, are we going to invest, are we going to expand? But to hear from the agents that sit at the kitchen table or talk to them on the phone or in a community meeting or whatever. So not only did we roll out a benefit, but how has that benefit worked the last year? So is it like the benefit's great, but nobody knows how to use it? Is it that nobody's using that benefit? Is it, is something else? Is there something else that's more important to them? Mm-hmm. And then this year was a lot. We talked about benefit cuts this year too, but like what benefits are people using? So our product team has always, looked at, okay, if we lay out all the data, right, what benefits are people using? What's going to be the most impactful? And a lot of that feedback comes from these agents that are the ones that are talking to the members.
It's true. So, and there's always that kind of concern that's behind the scenes too, is does the carrier want utilization on this benefit, right? Because sometimes it's a benefit looks amazing, but if you get 70% utilization, you're hosed, as far as the bid, right? I mean, I'm not talking about
ski passes and shoes.
Well, I'm not saying anything.
If you take one particular benefit, you take one particular benefit, I mean, you're hosed, and you may not be hosed for then, you're hosed for a couple of years, sometimes.
We've seen that across the industry where people have gone double down on a specific benefit in a year, and then the next year it gets rolled back a little bit, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, too, that one of the things, and I don't know if I'm going to offend the folks at United Healthcare, but it's almost like it's that, that.
Nice preface.
I know. Hey, don't take this personally. But, no, I'm just
kidding. It's not about you.
It's almost like the stable annuity, right, for the broker that's out there and kind of looking to where to play. I want stability. I want this safe haven somewhere I can put the member. For a lot of them in like a chaotic year or two, I think that obviously you're winning because there's a lot of other carriers that are experiencing a lot more disruption. And so with a lot of their announcements, you guys are obviously very happy to accept a lot of that business right now.
Yeah.
But then also secondarily, when I think there's a lot of this disruption too, the brokers who have been around for a lot of years, like I call it the third. And there's that broker who is like really just getting started. There's that broker who's been around for about 5 or 6 years, who's experienced everything to the moon in benefits every single year. And then there's that broker that's been around
for a long time,
a little long in the tooth. It's been around for a long time, and they've seen it,
that
right?
Wasn't directed
buying
at me,
steak
right?
dinners for MA.
Yeah. I used to love doing that. So, and so I think for a lot of those brokers, when there's like, hey, there's a lot of chaos, like I'm just going to go to this safe harbor, this place where I think the business is going to be safe.
Well, we worked hard on it. So it's nice this is, again, I've said it, but this is a fun AEP for us. It's fun to see it all work out like we want it to, right?
Like the plans come to fruition, right?
Right.
You drew up that play, and it worked.
It worked. We had to hang on to it, for a long
talking
time.
About it for a while.
A couple of years for stuff. While we were saying that, you were rolling your eyes at us, but
yeah, you're like, trust us, this is going to work. You know what I mean?
Just hang in there with us.
So how early, Dan and I talk about this, like basically our first 4 days of AEP, we kind of know where we kind of know if we hit or missed, or where we're trending. Is it kind of the same with you guys and the carriers as soon as you first start getting those initial, it's like the E word that we just happened when you start getting the initial returns and you're like, things are looking good or not,
I mean, in the sales world, we look day one, and for us, I mean, I can just tell you just from a salesperson, having been in the multiple sales roles in this organization, when the first results from the first day come in, if you're green, you're good. If you're red, you're not crawling out. It's like it just how it comes out is how it comes out. Now you can swing it, a few percentage points either way, but it feels like once you get a few days in, you're like, oh man, this is gonna be good, or like, oh man, this is gonna be a long 54 days. Like either one of those statements. Technically, as an organization, we always tell everybody, to hang on till Halloween, and then you have a pretty good indicator. We on our team nationally have Jay, which that's not even actually his name.
I don't think we're allowed to share his name.
I don't want anybody to be able to find him.
Yeah.
But he's our data and analytics guy, and we give him a solid week 1, and he's pretty good at telling us where the pin's going to land. Yeah. And it's crazy, but, if we look at the business, because, every year I'll have a conversation with him, like, it feels like there's so many more plan changes. Well, there are, but from a volume standpoint, there are a ton more plan changes because there's more apps, but it's still the same percentage of business. It feels like, whatever, and he'll be like, Rachel, it's going to be the same as it every year. Week 1 is, a certain percentage of the business. And, I don't have any reason to believe it's going to be any different. I'm very interested to get to the end of AEP and see if all of those trends hold true. I won't know until we get to the end, because it feels to me like we had a lot of volume really quickly out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And, I attribute that to the amount of SARs that were in this business.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, I don't know if Jay's going to prove me wrong. At the end or not.
I would think though too that, you're right. We know like the first 7 days usually for us, like 7 days for sure. We know where we're going to land with everything. But I want to bring that up too, is because like we call it like your run rate, right? In the industry,
for sure.
Where you kind of know on a daily your run rate. And so like, we always kind of talk about like the business side of it more. So when agents are listening, they should be applying the same like business fundamentals to their business, where you go, hey, you should be, if your goal is, let's say 100 apps in AEP, and you have like a pre-AEP period for 2 weeks, and the 15th rolls around and you submit 1 application or 2 application, guess what? You're not hitting your goal of 100.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You should have 10, 15, 20 enrollments that are kind of sitting there in the bank. You're submitting, and then you're writing more business and having your run rate. And then, people should be forecasting like, hey, maybe, you're working some Saturdays here and there. Like when we forecast, like we have our business days, and then we'll have like a weekend, and I'll group like 2 Saturdays and a Sunday together and go, I'll count a business day when I'm doing like my forecasting, right? Yeah. And I don't know how it gets like from an analytics perspective on your end, but like that's how I forecast.
It's the old finger in the air math. Yeah.
Feels like.
Yeah.
Because it's like some of my reps are working on Saturdays. There's some states.
We have trends for Saturday and Sunday. That's why like week 1 is week 1. It started on Tuesday this year. So like we couldn't count week 1. Jay was running no data for me until I got all the way through Monday, and he had Monday's data. Then that's week 1, because you have the same number of business days and weekends. Mm-hmm. If you start throwing weekends in there and you're measuring it against last year, and at this time you had 5 business days, and this year you have 3 and the 2 weekend days, your data's no good.
20% off, 30% off. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I had my 4-day was my how the first 4 days trend, because last year it started on a Sunday, I believe. Yeah. And so I knew however the first 4 days ended would kind of be a really good indicator of how our AEP would go.
Yeah, it's true.
I look at day 1, I'm like, or super happy. It was, I'm not going to lie. When I get up and get my coffee and turn my computer on, I don't have heart palpitations this year,
right.
So it's good.
Right. Enjoy getting up.
I'm happy when I get up.
I think most of your broker managers and directors have very, very achievable sales goals, I'm sure, this year. So that's great for them, right? Some alleviation there.
It's a good year for you.
Like I said, it's been a couple years, so it's nice to see across the country. It's nice to see wins. Yeah, for sure.
And I want to talk about like the cycle of the business too, because it seems like years ago you would have like busy and slow times. You'd have this cyclical thing that would happen, and now there's no rest.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are never taking it easy at any point. Like I feel strung out like year round. Like
there's no good time to take vacation.
No, there's really not, because even like we're talking about, we're in the middle of AEP, and I'm trying to already start forecasting next year. Like we're having a big all employee meeting next week. We're talking about our 2025 growth strategy.
Yep.
We're kind of closing the books on the year.
Weeks.
Yeah, we're closing the book on the year, even though it's the end of November.
Right.
Just because we already know mostly from a forecast perspective, where we're going to land, where our sales is going to be, where our revenue is going to be. We already kind of know that. I'm sure it's the same way at the carrier.
This year's a little bit different for us because of DSNP.
Right.
The changes with the DSNP plan. So forecasting has been a little bit more challenging, I think, on knowing what SEP will look like, what the flow of business is going to look like during SEP.
Well, I think with all the chronics that you guys filed, it's
not to put you on the spot, but do you see? Yeah,
but I'm going to.
Yeah.
But you warned us.
Do you see a change or maybe a reconsideration of that DSNP rule going into next year for the the quarterly SEP? I don't think CMS quite understood. It sounds silly to say, but I don't think they quite understood the way the impact of the reality was going to set in there with the Heidi's and the Fighties, and the actual effect being that these poor duals are actually going to have less access to choice throughout the year instead of more. Do you see there being any chance that gets kicked back or that gets changed for next year? You think it's pretty much baked?
No idea.
until we know. Yeah.
Well, until I know, when I know, you'll know.
Well, you know what? They just announced today or yesterday, the CMS, like the Part B premiums, all the information for next year for 2025. So, I mean, I think I was wrong because I was waiting for the new CMS call letter for 2026, which I thought would be dropping this week, and it's not. And so I'm sure we'll have a lot of that stuff to digest. But, looking forward to next year, it will be, a lot of the things, like I said, the table's set just from the call letter already that we're dealing with. But just the business cycle, we're already kind of wrapped up with the year. You guys are already talking about 2026 plans. Like 2025 is already kind of done.
Yeah.
And so to kind of give agents that are listening the perspective, there's already going to be walk us through next year, because they're already having discussions about product, where you think your numbers are going to land. If you got more members than you thought, what does that do from a financials perspective and a bid filing? When do you start having that? War games, preliminary filings, early June, round 2, TBC, all that kind of stuff. Can you give us a little bit of a preview on that?
The time frame has been, the same for a long time. So it's the process, right? I mean, we won't have there's discussions, product discussions already start to happen, right? And then that's at the health plan, the health plan CEOs, the product team is kind of working on, versions of bid filing until we get to that, what we call our product planning process, right? That they pull in local markets, they pull in sales leaders, they have the product team, they have, it's, a whole involved process, and talking about what we need in the market. They'll have more data on what kind of AEP look like and what is, kind of foreshadowing what we think. But there can be pretty significant changes from initial to final bid, right? And these last couple years, you've seen it. I mean, you saw a pretty decent rebid, year before last, a pretty good rebid. Everybody held on to it, knowing that rebid could have been fairly significant this year, even more significant. So you saw all the carriers knowing the changes that were coming. Nobody let benefits out. You didn't really get June benefits and sneak peeks in July. It was mid-August before anybody really kind of let out the final benefits. So the timing,
mid-September.
We were mid-August. Well, it's funny. We've always tried to be later for the rollout. We've always been we're usually the last large carrier to do a rollout. And so everybody's already released the benefits. And this year we had all the national partners in Minnesota, and we were the first one to release benefits this year. So it was an odd, again, something different about this year. We had them up there and said, because of timing, we had pushed the rollout back just a week, but we're normally in August, and said we're going to wait till we have the benefits to talk about strategy and what we did and why we did it this year. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that become a trend, because I think there's more pressures, right, from, 1 year didn't work. It didn't work everything out, right? There's more changes that are coming, right? So it wouldn't shock me to see now it become August, which puts a lot of pressure, or even September. It puts a lot of pressure on agency owners and ultimately agents to prep, because you're talking about now you got 30 days or 45 days and you're taking your first look at benefits and trying to figure out your strategy and, what the market looks
felt
like.
more last minute for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, there's a lot of things, and I think it's important for agents and people in the industry to understand, even though there's been a change in the administration, a lot of stuff's pretty much kind of already set, right? I mean, the new administration doesn't even take office until January, and then we're already in kind of like war games, and we don't really know what the funding environment's going to look like. How much is United aware of like what's going on next year? Is it too early to tell? Do you expect it's going to be kind of? What I'm trying to set the table is I don't think any of these pending issues are going to be very quickly resolved. There's still probably going to be headwinds and unresolved things going into bid and all that for next year.
I mean, we're not. It's way too early, so I don't know, but it's not going to be like this was 1 year and we're going to go back to significant investment, right? I mean, it's kind of a shift that I think we're seeing in the business. I have no idea what next year is going to look like then.
I would comment on one thing, and I am not speaking on behalf of United Healthcare. This is Dan talking about my opinion. The one thing I do think is that, some of the provisions that were put into compensation for like health equity and some of those things, I do envision some of those things being thrown out or gone by the wayside, probably. Like we've always seen it, like funding environment going from, then they started incorporating like caps into like the funding environment. We're talking about V28 next year. They moved all those cut point thresholds on the star ratings, which caught a lot of people by surprise this year. Even though they kind of said their intent, but didn't, it was kind of murky. They're
real good at murky.
Yeah. Well, we didn't mean that. We use these words, but that wasn't our intention.
That's actually not what we meant.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's very convoluted. Yeah. And look, if you're on the right side of it, you don't care. But if you're on the wrong side of it, absolutely, you're hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
So, I mean, anyways, I do think a lot of that, again, the components or the inputs, the data inputs that go into calculating funding, will definitely change this next year, I'm sure. But that's like,
I mean, I'm not on the product team, not on finance. Don't pretend to be a CFO ever. But that's an evolving calculation every year. It's part of it's part of what's pretty remarkable when it goes into what goes into the product planning. Yeah, you're right. I think it's going to look different this year than it did last year, and 26 is going to look different again.
Sure.
But I don't have no early. It's too early. Any neuro intel or anything.
Like you'd said, you have meetings until December 20th,
right.
and it used to be AEP ended. It's like, hey, set the autoresponder until
I'll
catch
see
you mid-January.
Yeah, I'll see you in January. I'd come back January 3rd, and I'd be like, nobody's going to return my phone call till like the 15th.
Exactly. and that's not how the industry is anymore.
No,
and
it's not.
Even with some of the time frames that have been pretty traditionally established over the past 5 or 6 years, I don't really think it'll ever go back to that quite uniformity of like the time cycles where it's like, here's when we have planned bids and here's when the rollouts are and here's when everybody, I think it'll be a little bit more convoluted going forward.
We talked a little bit about in the educational series that we did, we talked about the funding over original fee for service, and this, very possibly could have been the all-time high, that we saw last year, right, in the funding mechanisms that we see. But, again, nobody has a crystal ball. We have different people in office. I don't have any idea what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I wouldn't disagree with that.
It was so consistent for a while. It feels like for the last 6 or 7 years, it's been like clockwork, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, rollout meetings, I don't have rollout dates, set for our national rollout, but I don't know what product is, and I maybe it is going to be mid-August again too. So, and then I think roundtable discussions will be really interesting this year with agents too, because given the dynamic that products were so late, what can we help with? Mm-hmm. I feel like we tried really hard to do some expansion looks, skinny down first looks in July. We did do that before we rolled out final, and while it wasn't a ton of information, it kind of let you know where new products were going to be. You got to see some C-SNP expansion. You got to see some D-SNP expansion from us before you saw all the details. We worked real hard on things that were feedback, like collateral for the agents to be ready, more dedicated stuff to CSNP because of the CSNP expansion, because now 70% of the population lives in a CSNP area. So we knew that obviously that's a broader reach for agents, right? More collateral around the fully integrated, the dual options, some timelines and cheat sheets, which are super complicated, that have come out about election periods and dual. So this year at the round table, okay, this is what we did last year. What did we fall short on? What can we do to help you if that timeline looks like it does last year? Like what do you need from us, right? And I think that that'll continue to be an important conversation too to share.
Agreed. Perfect. Yeah, just looking, kind of we're getting semi-close to the end here, but I kind of look at like a SWOT analysis, right, of next year. Like what are the opportunities? What are some of the things that are on your radar going into next year of maybe potential? If you're an agent, what are some of the opportunities that you have to grow next year versus some of the things that you're kind of keeping an eye on?
You mean for 25?
Yeah.
In 25? Oh, yeah. So, I still think there's a ton of opportunity for dual. And you'll see, more training, even more collateral, more resources from us all the way down to the local market level to make sure that agents understand the election periods that are available to use for dual members. So it's always a huge percentage of our business during SEP. So that doesn't, while the periods change, they've changed for some states, it's still an opportunity for agents. And then CSNP, for sure, our footprint went from 30% to 70%. And if you look at our existing population and think about the CSNP plans, over 50% of the eligibles have a qualifying condition for CSNP. So making sure agents understand the process for verification, what the qualifying conditions are, how we set members up on those plans. Those are all really important things that I think will continue. And then, the non-SNP portfolio has done phenomenally well this AEP. It's been crushing it. And so typically when you see markets win during AEP, they tend to continue to be strong markets all the way through, SEP too. So it's kind of, that'll be good for us. Now, obviously, non-SNP, unless you've got somebody aging in, but I think the continual options for the DSNP and the CSNP will be huge. So
one thing that I would kind of bring up to that too, kind of a challenge that I think in the industry at large for an agent who's out there is, and I bang this drum a lot, is just you need to be better. We talk about value a lot. This is probably the 10th podcast episode I talk about being valuable. And if you're uncertain about your future in the industry, if you're uncertain about, oh my gosh, am I going to get paid commissions from carriers or not? If you're being valuable and providing valuable work, you're going to be okay. But that means that the broker community at large needs to be better and invest time in going to trainings, in reading information and material and things that are applicable to the industry. And brokers and agents and agency owners need to understand a Heidi-Fighty versus a non-integrated plan. They need to really understand like a chronic and why and the funding environment to a DSNP or a CSNP and what's more suitable for their client. It's just not quite the industry it was back in 2008 when you had like 3 or 4 plans in the market and you understood those 3 Hickens and that's it. It's a lot more sophisticated. And so I think that's the one thing. Yeah, it's you can't just have your regular full-time job and put on your AEP Medicare cape, come October 1st and go be successful.
I don't think this business is set up like that anymore. I don't think I'm sure there's still some agents that are here for AEP and then kind of disappear into the woodwork. But I think if this is it, you're like, yes, factually there are. Yes. We have some.
They call me and they're like, hey, things changed this year.
Wow, did you know this?
Yeah. It's definitely a year-round business now. And ultimately, we're all serving the same population, which is a consumer. So, if you're doing the right thing for your members and they're doing the doctor checks and the drug checks and talking to them about the benefits on the plan and making sure that they're putting members in the right plan, regardless of, who's paying more, to you. But if you're doing the right thing by the member, we're all going to be okay.
Yeah. One final question I had is we talk a lot about DSNPs, and one of the challenges we had this year was the eligibility, right? And a big part of that was the change hack, which, change is part of the UHC ecosystem. And it seems like right before AEP, that was basically restored. Are you hearing that it's back to the former glory days? I haven't heard near as many complaints about
I think it's back
eligibility.
We're back online.
And you think that's the eligibility verification, it's like as good as it ever was before, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think
because I haven't heard any.
That was huge. I mean, it was tough. Like first, second, third, like throughout this year, that was really, really hard, especially with the partial duals versus the full duals. And we saw like a spike in our RFIs and things like that we just couldn't control because we were just blind. We're like, I think you're on this eligibility level,
It was tough.
It was hard. So having that element back in play, like right before AEP, like we started seeing it in like all the aggregator tools, and all the quoting tools about 2 weeks before AEP started. So that was like a huge godsend, especially with how chaotic this AEP has been. So that was
to have that back for sure.
That
it was definitely
huge.
a focus. It took a lot of work for the teams to get that back up and running. So and AEP to have it all, we're like, please before AEP.
And it is nice that I do trust that United would be the one the org overall to really reshape that and rebuild that tool in the way that it needs to be. Because it's just so important, right? And it became weirdly.
I mean, you have to have it
to
enroll. I mean, if you think about when duals first came out, and it, how the issue rate or the accretion rate on duals, not knowing the eligibility levels and stuff, it's important. It makes us all more efficient.
That's why it became so painful, is because it had gotten so good and so easy, right? Like
when dual becomes 30 to 40% of your MA business and it's impacted by it, it's massive. It's huge. Yep. So we felt that pain. I would just say before we wrap up, the one thing I really liked was hearing you talk positively about, distribution and agents. And, I really look at, and I don't think that brokers and agencies and sometimes even like CMS, they don't really look at our industry like a full supply chain. If you really look at other industries and how they work from, I teach my kids about making a pencil from chopping the tree down to, the fabrication down to, every step in a supply chain.
That dead.
I'm that dad. I give them better education than the school. Sorry, teachers. No, but like you really look at, we have this very sophisticated industry, really, from PBMs down to, and CMS all the way down to a consumer. And like, I feel like the FMOs or the agency side, like we're one step or one in that supply chain. Mm-hmm. And then you look at like the mid-size agencies and the agents who produce and sell to that consumer. There's all these parts in the supply chain. I really liked hearing you talk about how important the broker is and the agent is and the experience, and same with the agencies and distribution, because I felt definitely very defensive over the past year about some of the regs and proposed changes, and things have been a little chaotic.
I did too. You can ask anybody inside.
I've been defensive because I always tell people, like, look, I work damn hard for our money. Like we really have to provide a lot of value to not only our carrier partners that we take very, very seriously that contract with, those suppliers, and we have to really earn our money with those agents and agencies who trust us. And it's good to hear some reassurance from a carrier saying, like, no, like agents and agencies and FMOs are really vital to the industry.
I think I spent 20 years in commercial before I came over to Medicare, and one of the biggest differences was the broker population, and I think that this broker population lends itself more to service-minded, trying to take care of people, trying to do the right thing, like I just talked about, for the consumers. And we shouldn't lose sight of that, right? Who we're all ultimately serving. But it's one thing that I think is really awesome about this population. When you go out in the local market and you talk to somebody that's sitting at a community center, or, I take an escalation call from an agent that's trying to help a member desperately get the care that they need, or, whatever it may be, find the right provider, verify that a drug is going to be in fact covered if they've moved to this plan. Those are the people that are keeping this business going, day in and day out. And, we appreciate them. Appreciate all of them. There's a ton of them, and we can't do it. I think every level serves a purpose, and that's kind of what we were talking about. How you support the people that you work with, for and alongside is extremely important, and that's one of the things that, there wasn't a lot about the regulatory. There was not much about the regulatory stuff that I loved, other than that I think it created some alignment again in the industry across, all the different entities that we have, and kind of all rallying about what you guys do to support distribution, and you should continue to have a voice. I think it's important for everybody to hear it.
Yeah, we did an episode. We talked about it was like Avengers Endgame, and we all have been banded together to fight Thanos. It seemed like everybody was.
I love seeing it. It kind of made me happy.
Yeah, one thing my hope would be that going into next year that carriers and distribution and regulators maybe can have a little bit more working together hand in hand to ultimately do what's best for the consumer. I think the industry could definitely do for some of that is some understanding of like the roles that each entities are playing and how to ultimately serve these consumers, because we have to keep like this industry. Story. Yeah, and we all like this industry because I think it's a very rare thing where you can help somebody get compensated well and be able to feel good about what you're doing, that you're making a difference for people. So
going back to the roots, we always tell people, I have recruited a lot of agents over my years, and we say it's a noble profession. What you do is very noble. You're helping seniors. You're helping them save money. You're helping, anyways.
Tate was just one of our new recruiters was telling us he's been going out into in-home appointments, learning, and this lady was giving him fruit cake. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, his grandson. I'm like, yeah, it's good, right? Like, he's loving it. So
you made good commission, and
she's gonna call him.
Exactly.
She is.
For the rest of her life.
Yep, exactly. And he's young,
which is a cool thing.
And she's gonna live for 30 years, and we're gonna have a great LTV on her because she's awesome. I'm just kidding. But no, hey, just to wrap, you heard it here first. UHC, we appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're valued brokers. They appreciate what you do. No one's out to get you. We very much value everything that you're doing in the industry.
And Rachel and Mike, I appreciate you coming on. It's hard to get carriers to come on and, be able to talk freely and just have a conversation. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.